Well, there are really three main roles for OGCIO. So the biggest role, which takes most of the resource, is delivering the government's IT programs and having oversight of that across the whole of government, being responsible for the management of the IT professionals in the government, setting the technical standards, the interoperability standards, and so forth, and also having some control over the governance and financing of IT programs. The second role is externally facing. It's to facilitate the digital economy in Hong Kong. So that means things like internet governance in Hong Kong, and in particular facilitating the IT industry, giving government support to the growth of that industry and to enable it to play a global and regional role. And the third aspect of our role is digital inclusion. So that's to make sure that all members of society have the ability to benefit from the use of IT. The most significant things is that we've taken on responsibility for running the government's main website. So back in 2001, the government portal was outsourced, but since then we've brought it in-house. So that's GovHK, or www.gov.hk. And the aim of that website is to really build the community to meet 80% of its needs in dealing with the government on that website, whether that is needs for transactions or needs for getting information. And in fact, we've just revamped that website a few weeks ago. So that's really been quite a significant role. I think the other role that is changing is that as we've seen from the outside world, our customers have the government's customers have a much greater desire for joined up government, for integrated services. At the same time, the technology has evolved, so there's much more networked computing around, and in particular that will continue to evolve with the coming of cloud computing. So whereas 10 years ago, most of the government's IT was decentralized and done in each department had its own IT shop and had its own IT systems, its own IT programs. Nowadays it's much more sensible to have some shared systems, shared data, and so forth. And so OGCIO has a much expanded role in answering the question, what does it make sense to do centrally and what does it make sense to do in a distributed manner, and then of course it falls to us to deliver the things that it's sensible to do centrally. Well, I think we see the biggest change in the next few years being cloud computing, and how do we make use of cloud computing in the government, and that of course affects both the applications and the infrastructure. So whereas a few years ago it made sense for every department to have its own systems, nowadays we see it making much more sense in some areas for there to be some either common systems or common components. So that's in areas like information management and in collaboration. So the kind of collaboration tools you have in the government, because people in different departments need to collaborate with one another, you need to have a kind of common approach to collaboration across the government. To take another example, we're working on HR management. Again, in the past, really each department had its own HR management system, but in fact some of the processes for HR management go across the government, they're not inside each department. And in any event, many of the HR needs of each department, although every department has a different portfolio of needs, they're really all selecting from the same menu, or most of their needs are selected from the same menu. So by providing some common HR management infrastructure, we can make it much cheaper and more efficient for departments to get the IT support they need for HR management. And we can also make some of the processes work a lot better, such as just maintaining a lifetime employee record for employees as they move from one department to another. So I think that's really one of the big issues for modernisation. In order to work out what to do, we have in the last year, for the first time really for a long time, embarked upon a pan-government IT strategy. So whereas before each department would have its own IT strategy, we've now asked what IT strategy does the government need for the government as a whole, and that's going to addressing things like IT governance, so how do we set objectives and make decisions about where to put resources. IT-enabled business transformation, so how do we decide what pieces of business transformation should be done department by department, and which pieces of business transformation can be done across the whole government with pan-government IT support. We'll be looking at data, so data structures, data standards, how do we secure data, how do we make sure it's only accessed by authorised people, infrastructure, what do we do by way of acquiring technology and indeed software assets, and very importantly people. So we've got a big change programme underway for the government IT profession to make sure that we define the role that IT professionals need to play in the government as we modernise our IT, and make sure we equip people with the skills to deliver that.